Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. It's Kyla here speaking, and we have Nia and a really cool guest for you guys. Someone who just took first at Schwamigan, and that's not how I thought it was pronounced for those listening, but she was involved in NICA, so the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, where she was involved with cross-country mountain bike racing, which launched her into a professional career as an athlete. And she also, during that professional career, earned 6 national titles, 2 U23 World Cup podiums, and multiple top 15 World Cup finishes. And she's currently racing for Orange Seal off-road team. So we have for you guys, Savilia Blunk. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's see, we're talking a little bit, and before we hit record here, you grew up just right over the, I guess, ridge from me, technically, right? Over in Inverness.
Yeah, right over the hill. I grew up in a pretty rural, very small town in very West Marin. So it's a little bit, just like about 2 hours north of San Francisco. And yeah, we grew up just surrounded by forest, like pretty rural. And I was actually homeschooled till 9th grade. I have 2 older brothers. So we learned, did a lot of hands-on learning. And my family, I kind of come from a family of artists, so really hands-on and learning from the land, and really connected to the place that I grew up. So yeah, and yeah, it's a small world to know that you were real close.
Yeah. Definitely probably went on some field trips out your way, I would imagine. So I mean, I know we live in a beautiful area with lots of mountain biking. Did you get on a bike early at a young age, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, so my family was super outdoorsy. We kind of grew up just doing all kinds of things. We were really fortunate to live in an area really close to the mountains and trails, and really close access to being outside. So yeah, gosh, grew up doing all kinds of things, from climbing trees to chasing my brothers around on old hand-me-down rusted bikes. So that's really how I kind of got my start into being on 2 wheels. My dad was kind of one of like the original cyclists, just ripping around on old clunker bikes with his friends.
So does your dad know? Okay. So my husband works for the fire department, where this will maybe ring a bell. Otis Guy.
Oh yeah. I was actually coached a little bit with the Fairfax like summer camp crew, cycling summer camp crew. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So my husband worked with Otis Guy, and Otis, I mean, he's retired now, but he was one of the clunker guys. So they must have ridden together, I would have imagined.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's also funny because Inverness is like such a little, it's kind of separate from the rest of Marin. So maybe they cross paths, but yeah, I feel like everyone kind of knows each other, has heard of each other, but that's funny. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I had, 2 older brothers that really, the combination, I think, of my outdoorsy family, being on bikes from a young age, and then I had 2 older brothers. So we were like, I was always just chasing them around, and we were building jumps and pump tracks in our backyard. Awesome. And just, I was always just trying to be as fast as them, I guess, chase them around. So that's what really kind of sparked my competitive edge, I think. And then my middle brother actually started racing with NICA and started racing bikes. And so that's kind of what introduced my family to this world of racing. And I decided to go to a public high school starting in 9th grade, and started my years in NICA through that. So I actually went to the first all-girls high school. I went to an all-girls high school that had the first all-girls high school mountain bike team in the nation at the time. So it was a super small team, and a little group, like a small group of girls, but we were able to race NICA, and yeah, it was a really great experience to race like every weekend and just kind of get that experience. And I remember lining up at the first races, and I think our field was like maybe 14 or so girls, and just yeah, being in that environment and seeing like, wow, other girls really like to push themselves like this. Like, this is pretty cool that we can do it together. And yeah, I mean, that's a big thing for me, is to now see the growth of that, because I think you go to any NICA race now and gosh, the fields are 60 plus. So it's really grown exponentially.
That's amazing. Can I ask what high school it was that you went to, the all girls that had the first girls team?
It was called San Domenico High School.
Okay. Yes.
So you're probably familiar with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I've had some friends that went to San Domenico. I didn't realize they were the first ones to have an all girls team. That's amazing. Cause I remember when I was going through high school, this is going to age me, but I graduated in 2007. So, but we had just started to have a mountain biking team, and there was only one girl. And I think it started like my senior year, and it was definitely very intimidating because it was all boys and this one girl. And I mean, I look back now and I'm like, I wish it had gotten bigger, or there was more, emphasis with getting girls involved at that time, because yeah, it's fun to do. Right. That's amazing. That makes me so happy. So tell us what happened after San Domenico, after NICA.
Yeah. So gosh, I think throughout NICA, that's where I really got my start in racing, started racing more frequently, and then realized that, yeah, you can go beyond that and take it to the next level. And so I throughout high school, I started to do some national level races. I did a couple trips with USA Cycling to Canada and to Europe, and kind of dipped my toes in that kind of competition. And I was hooked. I mean, I think, yeah, like my brother stopped racing at the end of high school, but I was super inspired, and I just continued and kind of had a steady growth. And yeah, I think I decided when I went to college, I actually took a gap semester after high school, because I was not really sure what I wanted to do. I went to World Champs in Cairns, Australia in 2017, and I ran into a bunch of people there, athletes from the national team that were going to Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado.
Nice.
And at the time I was like, I'm taking a gap semester, like I'm going to just work and save some money. And then I was actually deferred from another college for the spring. So I met these guys from Durango, from Fort Lewis, and I was like, this college sounds really awesome. So I went home and I kind of did some more research, and long story short, I ended up going to Fort Lewis College in the next spring. So
nice.
That was a really kind of pivotal move for me, because it enabled me to continue racing and really develop as an athlete, but also go to school and get an education, which were two things that were really important to me, to have that kind of balance. And, you're not going to be racing your whole life, so it's always good to have that backup plan.
Yes.
But yeah, I went to Durango and really met a ton of people to ride with, and that pushed me. And I think that's been the biggest thing in the recent years, is like just having so many people who are better than me, who I just learned so much from every day, and just a lot of people to ride with and a lot of opportunities there. So, and great trails. So yeah, I guess I can attribute a lot of my growth in the last 5 or so years to being there.
That's awesome. And good altitude exposure, I imagine, too.
Yeah. Which at times is good. And at times I'm like, I need some sea level air, but yeah.
That's great.
It's been good.
What did you study in college?
So I studied business and marketing, actually, which as I kind of developed in my career, it really was super applicable. And at first, I had so many interests, and I wanted to go all these different directions. So I think I changed my major like 4 times. And then I was like, I didn't really have a background in business.
Mm.
So it was a really, really helpful thing for me to study, and
Yeah.
it has really helped with my career. So
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as a athlete, to represent yourself, I mean, you have to have some business skills, I would imagine, to, I mean, get sponsors and all of that stuff. Do you do that all yourself, or does someone help you, or the team, or how does that work?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're basically running your own business as an athlete, and yeah,
Wow.
it depends from people to people. I'm on the Orange Seal off-road team, so that's been a huge resource and support. But yeah, it is a really good skill to know.
Yeah. Wow. So for our listeners, we have a lot of endurance athlete listeners, but some of these people maybe are runners, maybe are ultra runners, maybe are triathletes. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what a typical race like looks like for you? Is it on pavement? Is it on dirt? Is it single track? Like, tell us a little bit about that so that listeners can get an idea.
Yeah, so I race cross country mountain bike. So our races are typically an hour and a half on a short lap, like 3.5 kilometers usually. So each lap is like 12 minutes about, and we do 6 or 7.
Wow.
And it's, yeah, I mean, it's all out from the start, and very, yeah, very intense racing, off-road, up and down. So cross country for sure. Um, and yeah.
I think that's a helpful perspective too, like the 60 to 90 minute range too, if we're thinking about, because we're going to talk about nutrition, obviously. So I with Schwamigan, I'm going to probably say that wrong at some point during this podcast. And just for you guys listening, it is spelled Chequamegon. So this is why I'm going to mess it up. But it was something like that. Was that a 90-minute duration situation as well?
Yeah. So for the bulk of my season, I'm racing cross country World Cups, which are, yeah, that kind of 90-minute mark. And my fueling strategy for that is definitely very specific. But for Schwamigan, it was about 2.5 hours, I think. So a little bit longer. My fueling actually stayed pretty much the same as my cross country race. But it's funny, I mean, because yeah, it's so different, because my boyfriend actually, he races more marathon style races, and our fueling strategies, I mean, we're also completely different physiology, but it's very different. And yeah, it's really interesting how that changes. But I guess for short cross country races, it's a little bit more simple than when he has to plan out for an 8-hour race or something like that.
Yeah. Does it help being on a track where you're doing multiple laps as opposed to something that's kind of one giant loop? Because there's aid stations, or how does that work for your racing?
Yeah. So in a typical cross country race, there's a feed zone that we usually hit twice. So it's a double-sided. So that's an area where I'll usually take a bottle every lap. So yeah, usually if we're doing 6 laps, I'll prepare like 12 bottles and be trying to drink like half a bottle every half lap. So 1 bottle every lap to get in the liquids. But yeah, it's definitely, it's just different, I would say. I mean, when you're racing a longer race, and you have to be more self-sufficient, and sometimes carry a hydration pack or bigger bottles, and kind of strategize that. It's yeah, a lot more to think about.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I mean, definitely different than what we think about probably for like a triathlon or something like that. So with that, you mentioned like being self-supported. So are you like, do you have a section that you set up at that feed zone that's for you, or is there someone there handing you a bottle, or do you have to stop your bike and grab it, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the race, it's a mass start. This is cross country. So mass start, and you're basically going all out from the gun. So we have staff in the feed zone that is there with our bottles, and we'll hand them out. We go past, like, there's no really slowing down in that area. There's kind of like a loose agreement that nobody attacks in the feed zone, because everyone's trying to get a bottle, but sometimes that still happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely the team is there in the feed zone with our bottles, and sometimes ice socks or dump bottles if it's a real hot day.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's very interesting. And so with your hydration, how has your hydration game plan evolved over the years? And to add to that too, what's your favorite go-to hydration product that you use now? And you can say brand names because we're not sponsored by anybody.
Yeah. Well, I guess over the years, I've definitely gained a lot more knowledge of what my body needs. And as I've kind of developed and am now at the highest level, so getting your nutrition dialed is extremely important. It can be the difference between, top 5 and top 20.
Yeah.
So yeah, with the cross country races where I'm hitting the feed zones every lap. As I said, I'm taking a bottle every half lap, but yeah, I've been really liking the Never Second C30 mixture. So it has 30 grams of carbs per scoop, and I do half a scoop for half a bottle. So that it gives me some carbs and hydration. And then I actually sometimes I put the GU electrolyte tab in with that to kind of boost up the electrolytes.
Nice.
So I have kind of a mixture of carb and electrolyte that I'm using to fuel.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that one of the guys who started that company was one of my professors, Oscar.
Yeah, for sure.
Does he ever spoke to your team or anything? Given nutrition?
Yeah, so I work with The Feed.
Okay, yeah.
Which is an online retail store with nutrition. And yeah, I've spoken to him a bit, and wealth of knowledge right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's one of the top for sure sources of information. He's fantastic. So with kind of you mentioned the ice socks. What are those? Tell the listeners what that is.
Well, you go to the pharmacy and you grab like those stockings,
like pantyhose.
And, pantyhose. And we just fill them with ice and tie the knots at the end. And that's a really good way. I mean, you can also use an ice vest, but that would only be used before the start of the race. But an ice sock is great because you can just stuff it in your jersey and then it will melt, and the pantyhose doesn't weigh anything. So that'll just fall out when you finish the race. But yeah, that's a good way to keep the body cool when it's really hot. But typically if it's hot, I'm also just taking dump bottles, and I try to grab that like at World Champs in Liège, France. It was a pretty hot day. So I was trying to take a dump bottle every time I went through the feed zone. And just the longer that you can keep your core body temperature as low as possible, the less performance you're going to lose by the end of the race. So it's definitely kind of like there's a lot going on in the feed zone. So it's really a juggling act to fuel, drop your old bottles, grab the water. So but it's again super important, and really can be the difference between a good result and not.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of on that note, have you ever had to do or done any sweat testing to determine what your like sweat sodium concentration is, or fluid losses, or any of that stuff?
Yeah, I actually have not done like anything super professional yet, but that's definitely in the books for the future. I'd really like to kind of hone that in and see the results of that.
Yeah. It also makes me think, since we were just talking about Oscar, the Super Sapiens CGM. Have you ever tried that, or are curious to try that?
No.
Yeah. I see. I mean, it's technically not FDA approved for the US. So a lot of European countries and athletes have it over there, but they're working on it, working on getting it over here eventually. So we talked a little bit about hydration. It sounds like you get your fuel in the bottle. So no additional like chews, blocks, waffles, any of that stuff that you use typically during racing?
Yeah, no. So I actually use a combination of the Never Second hydration mix and then their gels. So
Okay,
in a 90-minute race, I'll usually take 3 gels
mm-hmm.
throughout the race, and I start with a caffeinated one. I think the caffeinated one has about 75 milligrams, I want to say.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I'll start with that one about 30 minutes in, and then the
Mm-hmm.
caffeine will hit about 45 minutes later. So
Nice.
when I'm really needing it. And
Mm-hmm.
then the next 30 or so minutes, I'll take just a regular one. And each of those has also 30 grams of carbs. So
Nice. Yeah.
yeah, with that and the hydration, I'm getting about what I need.
That's awesome. I think the important thing we should point out for the listeners there is the timing of the caffeinated gel. So I've seen many people, I mean, for that duration, right? You have to time it accordingly. You don't want to take it too soon and have that caffeine kick in halfway through and then it's starting to taper off by the finish. So timing that, like you're saying, at that point is important where you get it to peak in your system towards the end when you're maybe starting to fatigue a little bit, but not after. You don't want it to peak after you finish the race, right?
Yeah. And that's something that I was kind of doing without really knowing for quite a while, is I would take it towards the end of the race because I was thinking like that's when I need it. But actually, the caffeine will really hit your system about 45 minutes after you take the gel. So that's why I take it first. And then when I'm needing it in the last bit of the race is when I'm feeling it, instead of like 40 minutes after the race is over and you're wondering why you're just jacked up still.
Can't sleep. That's I've definitely seen many athletes run into that, or especially when we get into the long duration stuff. I'd be curious if your boyfriend has to deal with this at all with caffeinated stuff, but if they start using too soon or don't keep it consistent, once they start using it for, multiple hour events, that it can taper off, or you start to feel that kind of like fatigue kick in. Does he ever deal with that, or does he use caffeine when he races? Do you know?
Yeah. I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but I'm pretty sure that he does use caffeine, but he takes it like definitely at the last quarter or last half of his longer, like 6-hour races or so. Because you don't want to have that crash in the middle of the race.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what does, after you do an event like this, like the 2.5 at Schwamigan, I have to keep looking at my written pronunciation on my screen, or past races where they're maybe a little bit shorter than 90-minute duration, what does recovery look like immediately after that race?
Yeah. Recovery directly after any kind of race, if it's long, short, I treat it all the same. And it's kind of that 15-20 minute window is critical. And for me, the biggest focus is getting in carbs and liquids directly after the race. So I actually am just doing cherry juice directly after the race. And I have it ready at the finish line, and I just it's great because it's carbs and hydration. You're directly rehydrating the body and getting it carbs. And then in the next hour or so, I try to have like a meal or something with some protein and more balanced.
Nice. Do you notice with the tart cherry, do you notice any changes in when you start implementing that with your sense of recovery feeling or muscle soreness or anything like that?
It's hard to like pinpoint anything super specific, but it just feels good, I guess. I think that I never really realized how much my body craved the liquid, the hydration. So that's really key. And then it's also nice because if you finish a race and you kind of have that feeling of like you need something, it really puts that off, and it gives my body exactly what it needs for that time. And then you don't have to really stress about like getting in a meal or something right away, because sometimes that's not even possible.
I think that's smart. But I think a lot of people don't realize how many fluid ounces they lose sometimes when they train or race, and they want to prioritize food, but they end up getting super thirsty, and that can make them feeling fatigued, the dehydration piece, just later in the day. So prioritizing those fluids, I think is definitely critical. Do you, in terms of like prep leading up to these events, do you do any sort of like carb loading or glycogen supercompensation or anything like that?
Yeah. So pretty much it's just the day before the race is I try to really load the carbohydrates, and I'm taking about 10 grams per kilogram of
Oh,
body
yeah.
weight per
Good for
carbs.
you. That's hard for people to get that in.
Yeah, like it's actually, I don't know, I eat a lot in
Yeah.
general. So it's definitely, it's something I have to like think about, but it's
Yeah.
not as hard as I would actually think it would be for
Yeah.
me. But
Good. That's
but
great.
uh but yeah, no, that's super important the day before, just really loading that up so I'm
Mhm.
not at any kind of depletion on
Yeah.
race day. And that's the same for a short cross country race or a
Hmm.
long endurance race.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really trying to focus on that.
Yeah. I love hearing that because when I give my athletes their carb requirements for events, they look at it and they're like, oh my God, that's so much. Like, and they sometimes have a hard time getting it all in. So, I mean, we've tried implementing various like liquid carb sources and obviously not relying 100% on like food carbs. What is your kind of like go-to carb loading look like? Foods and drinks or things like that? How do you get that in?
Yeah, I guess it is a little bit tricky, and I'm also kind of trying to dial it in still,
Mm.
because trying to avoid that feeling of just being really full,
Yeah.
or full when you go to bed.
Hmm.
But I think for me, it's been key to just have like multiple meals throughout the day
Yeah.
and breakfast, lunch, dinner, but have like a slightly bigger snack in between each of
Hmm.
those, and it's just fully carb focused. And
Yeah.
I try to stay away from fats on the day before because it just will slow down the process of the carbs
Yeah.
really fueling you. So yeah, I really stick with solid foods. I haven't
Hmm.
experimented too much with any form of liquid, but it's worked for me. I mean,
Yeah.
the night before the race, I always keep it pretty much the same race to race,
Hmm.
with what I eat. And a super easy one, and everyone is always like, gosh, that's so boring, but I've always done rice and eggs.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Hmm.
And to me, yeah, it's just something that works well. It's super easy. You can find it in any country, so
Hmm.
you always know you'll have it. For a while I was also doing risotto,
Hmm.
which is also another really good one, but yeah, not quite as simple or quick. So yeah, either one of those I usually stick with, and then throughout the day it's like pasta for lunch or
Hmm.
rice or something like that.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that's great. That's helpful for people to hear, I think, because I think I've had athletes come to me and they're like, well, I'll just eat like pizza and chips and all these things. And I'm like, those are also very high in fat. And like you're saying, they're going to slow down that digestion time and leave them feeling full, or maybe part of why they can't hit their carb target, right? Is why they're feeling so full of that stuff. So I think that's helpful. It's like simple, kind of maybe even boring carbs, like you're saying, just like plain white rice, plain pasta, stuff like that is easy. So kind of on a slightly different note, but still nutrition related, do you change nutrition at all when you do like any training camps at altitude or races at altitude? What is that like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because yeah, I mean, I still spend quite a bit of time in Durango, which is at
Mhm.
I'm at like 6,800 feet there, I think.
That's great.
So yeah, when I go up there, nutrition becomes even more important. Mainly just making sure I'm eating enough.
Hmm.
Your body is just working harder, especially in the first few weeks that you're up there when you're
Yeah.
trying to adapt to the altitude. So making sure I'm eating enough before and after training, really, really focusing on that. And yeah, staying hydrated. Everything is just harsher up there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I feel it every time I go up there, my body is just working a little or a lot harder, and
Hmm.
not able to recover as fast. So really just try to focus on fueling and making sure I'm getting enough. And I'm usually
Hmm.
eating a little bit more when I'm up there because
Yeah.
my body's just working harder.
Yeah. Do you change your hydration or fueling routine during your training sessions?
Not so much, not
Mhm.
really drastically. I mean, I did a training block up there for a couple months this summer. So
Mm-hmm.
with the heat, the dryness, I was definitely drinking a lot more.
Yeah.
And I on the longer rides, I travel with my hydration pack, or I'd ride with it.
Yeah.
And I was actually really impressed how much I was drinking. So.
Yeah, that's good. I think a lot of people too sometimes don't realize how much fluid they lose at altitude, especially in the first couple of days when they get up there. I've seen people have that suppression of appetite too when they get to elevation. And I think that's something we want to stay ahead of if we can, and if we're aware of it, that that's something that can happen. So yeah, I think it's important to increase the intake and the fluids for sure, electrolytes, all that good stuff. So the other question I have is, I was looking at your website, and you obviously are racing very regularly, definitely in the last year. I saw your schedule. Is there an off season for you ever?
Yes. So good question. Yeah, it's funny. Like in the last couple of years, my season has really, it's really drawn out quite a bit. So I'm like this year, I think my first race was the beginning of February, and then my last race will be November 6th. So, but these last couple months, I have like 3 races in the span of 2 months. So there's a little bit of time in between. But yeah, no, after my last race, I'll take 2 weeks, definitely 2 weeks, just completely off the bike, maybe 3 if I'm feeling like I need it. And then we'll just start getting back into riding slowly and building the endurance back. And then, yeah, usually I do some, try to do some like early season races just to get points. And also it's a good way to just get that top end just revving. But they're painful. Yes. I'm not ready for them ever, but yeah, it's just a good way to just get kind of shock the system back into that racing zone. So
yeah. You mentioned the points thing. Can you explain that to people? I don't think many people know about that or are aware of that.
Yeah. So my season is focused around cross country World Cups, and they're UCI races. So it's basically, it's a UCI sanctioned race, and you gain UCI points at them and at other UCI races that are not World Cups. And the more points you have determines like your start position. So it's really important to have a good start position. And that's why I'll do other UCI races outside of the World Cups to get more points. And it's also at most of the UCI races, like you're racing similar or the same competition you are at the World Cup. So my season is really focused around outside UCI races and then the World Cups.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's helpful for people to realize. Also, I would imagine like you're saying, your schedule goes from February to November, right? To get all those races in. So in that off season, or even during your training season, your in season, are you doing, are you riding 7 days a week? Are you incorporating strength work? Like, what does your kind of training weekly routine look like for you typically?
Yeah. So I'm typically training 6 days a week. I have one full rest day. A couple of those days are endurance, a couple are intensity, and some are kind of like more flexible rides. But definitely one full rest day. And then, as far as my strength routine, I race mountain bike. So I'm actually training this year. I've been training 100% on my mountain bike. Sometimes I put slicks on, that's like a really skinny tire. And we'll train on the road if I need some like more steady terrain. But I'm being able to train on my mountain bike is really, and then train on technical trail is really the best strength training that I've found for myself. I do like a kind of activation and mobility routine before every like hard workout. So that's been really important, just to activate the muscles. And I used to actually have like back pain when I raced. And then my coach was like, let's just try a little, like start doing some activation and just get the glutes firing before you ride and see if that helps. And that's helped completely. So I think that's been a really key thing for me, and just keeps things really firing for when I get on the bike.
I think that's awesome. I've had many cyclists have like low back issues, and I think that's important that you bring that up. the mobility piece and the activation is important. And so that's like mat work or floor work, or obviously pre hopping on the bike work that you do to fire the glutes, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's just a quick, like 15-minute routine. And I use a band around my knees and do some just glute activation, planks, push-ups, just a little bit of everything, kind of just to activate as many muscle groups as I can.
Yeah, that's smart. So talking about racing and riding, you've been to multiple places. I mean, you've been all over the world. I saw Spain, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Germany, Italy, all over the United States. It sounds like, is there a place that is like your absolute favorite course for racing that you've been to thus far?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there are a few, but I would say like Switzerland, we raced in Lenzerheide. And that's a course that I just really love. It's a super natural tech. So like really rooty and just all natural, no like super man-made stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a course that I really love. And then also just most recently in Val di Sole, Italy. I just love Italy. I really love the atmosphere there. And that course is also just, it's so hard, but it's a really good race course because it has just a little bit of everything, and the climbs are just, it's really challenging. So it's a really good one to race. And this year it was super dry and the course was like really, really blown out. So we were going through these like moon dust pits.
Oh my gosh.
That were just like worn in by riders. And so which made the course even more challenging because it's already like really steep climbs and really steep descents. But it's really beautiful there. So I always look forward to going there.
Yeah, that's great. And then I didn't get a chance to touch on it yet. I wanted to ask you, on your website, you have some favorite recipes on there. Can you tell us about those? I think we saw some like homemade fueling bites and balls and stuff like that. Are you using those often, or if you get some chance, maybe in the slower season when it's more aerobic work, or when do you use those?
Yeah. So, gosh, I just really love cooking and fueling, like being an athlete, and nutrition is even more important. And then I also just love cooking. So it's been kind of fun to just learn about the different ways I can improve in that realm, and also just do one of my passions. I grew up and my parents, they're not professional chefs or anything, but they both love to cook, and we had a big garden, and we'd eat a lot of off the land that we grew up on. So I definitely got that skill from them. So it was really fun. And it was just a big part of my childhood. It was just like cooking meals together and eating together. So I have some recipes on my website, but those were, I guess I wrote those a little, like they're pretty old, but I definitely use them a bit. But I love just, we really eat a big variety. I guess a lot of our meals are mainly carb and vegetable focused, proteins in there, but we definitely eat a lot of carbs. And my boyfriend, if you know him or even follow him on Instagram, you can see that he eats a lot of food, and I eat a lot. So anyway, it's pretty carb focused, but gosh, there's a couple recipes on there that I actually used the cookbook by Shalane Flanagan. I think it's Eat Fast or Eat Slow, Run Fast, or one of those. But has a lot of really good recipes that I enjoy because it's all pretty similar to the kinds of things that I already eat. But gosh, I mean, I make risotto sometimes before, like the night before a race, and that's just like arborio rice and like a bouillon cube.
Yummy.
And making like a broth with that, and then like saute onion, put the rice in, and then put the broth on top. Just pretty simple, but
sounds great.
That's
awesome. The cook fast, run fast, eat slow, or something like that. I always mix it up, but that is that's a go-to staple in our house as well. We love like her, I think it's like the bison chili is so good, and all the muffins and all kinds of, she has so much good stuff in there. But I think she just came out with another book, I think her third cookbook. So I gotta order that and check it out. So let's see, you mentioned a couple times your boyfriend, also pro cycling athlete, you said marathon distance. How is that? How do you guys manage travel schedules? I mean, it sounds like you do different race types, so maybe you're not going to the same locations. What is that like for you guys, racing, I mean, at the same time, or traveling to opposite sides of the world?
No. So he used to race World Cups.
Okay.
So our schedules were pretty similar. And then this year, recently, he's kind of made a transition to more marathon style, and he's in the Lifetime Grand Prix this year, racing some gravel and marathon mountain bike events. Wow. Our training and our schedules are now really completely different. This year, we've spent a lot more time apart when I go overseas, and he's racing more domestically. So as far as like, we're really traveling to very different races now, where it's really fun when our races align. Like at Schwamigan was the first one that we did together for the first time in a couple months. So that was really fun. But I mean, I think that it just works for us. It doesn't work for some people, but for us, like, we love to ride together when we can. And we have actually the same coach. So
good.
He tries to kind of make our plans align when they can. And then when we're like, I don't want to, like, I'm tired, I want to ride by myself, or I don't want to ride with him, then he's like, all right, we can make that happen too. So it's convenient that he knows both of us, and we make it happen when we can, and it's really fun. But his training is really completely different than mine. He's just doing a lot more volume than me. But it's just really nice to have somebody who just gets every aspect of it, really. It's really nice to have that person and relate on those levels.
That's good. Yeah, they understand, I'm sure, firsthand the travel and the training commitment and all of that stuff, the importance of nutrition, all of it. So I want to be mindful of your time here. What do you have coming up for you on the racing calendar? What's next?
So my World Cup season is finished. The last race was a few weeks ago now, but I'm still going to do some events back here in the US. So next up is Big Sugar Gravel for me. It's in Bentonville, Arkansas at the end of October. So I have a few weeks till that. And then a couple weeks after that will be the last race, and that will be Iceman. Iceman cometh in Traverse City, Michigan. So
it sounds scary. Is it just cold? Okay.
Typically, it can be super cold. I mean, you're getting into the kind of wintry months up there. Last year was the first year I did it. It's a point-to-point race and a super fun time. It's about an hour 20 race, so it's shorter, kind of more similar to my style of racing. It's a really good time, and the community up there is amazing. So a really good one to end the season on. But last year we were treated really well, had some really good weather. So it was more of a nice man. So we'll see what this year brings, but typically it is wet, cold, snowy.
Oh my goodness. We'll see. Yeah, I would imagine that's a whole different fueling game plan, but we can dive into that maybe in another podcast. But I want to kind of tie things up here. So where can people find you and follow along?
I'm on Instagram at Savilia Blunk, and I'm pretty active on that. So that's probably the best way to find me.
Perfect. Awesome. And we will link Savilia's website with her recipes and blogs and all that stuff as well. And we'll put her Instagram in the show notes for you guys to follow along on her journey. So thank you so much, Savilia, for joining us today. This is super helpful information for our listeners.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun to talk about these things.
Yes, ditto.